Well, hope everybody is doing well today. We're really excited to have such a great panel together, both a mix of people from the boot camp space, whether you have the up top view that Liz and the course report team provides. You've got Alex, who's running Burlington Code Academy, and then of course we've got a hiring partner as well, with Joey Shakespeare, and giving us a perspective of kind of what's going on in the tech industry, because a lot of people are asking the question, well, what do I do right now? And, as we're kind of updating the blog post that Liz and her team put together earlier this year, are coding boot camps worth it? And more specifically, are they now worth it with people working from home and the unknown of what the next few months has in store for us? So we figured this was a great opportunity to bring people together, answer some of these questions, and kind of talk about, the future of work and life in tech, which I think we all enjoy and have a lot of fun with. But I'm not going to try to talk too often, just be doing a little bit of moderating, bouncing some questions off of these experts. So first thing, I'll do a quick introduction. We've got Alexander Horner, who is one of the co-founders of Burlington Code Academy. Alexander's got a really cool story. We're gonna have to tap into his advice for giving pitches, because he is a 2-time pitch contest winner. We've got Liz Eggleston, who is the co-founder of Course Report. She has pretty much been with the bootcamp industry as it's grown, as it hit a little bit of a ceiling, and kind of as we're now seeing a little bit of a consolidation and change in what's going on in the market. And we've got Joey Shakespeare, who is the VP of Technology over at Clorox, and is a computer science graduate, but has mentioned in past interviews that he kind of wishes he had had the opportunity, or boot camps had been a little bit more prevalent at the time. So we'll start with you, Liz. This is a follow-up to your blog earlier in the year. Are boot camps worth it? And, can you kind of give us your thoughts, I guess, what got that blog post going and what has changed over the past few months?
Well, I mean, we wrote that blog post because it's basically the #1 question that we get most often, in one way or another. And, when I think about that question, like, listen, I run Course Report. It's a resource for students who are choosing a coding bootcamp. So I spend a lot of time talking to, future students, current students, and to alumni, and just hearing about like their struggles, their experiences getting jobs, and how they fared 2 to 3 years into their careers. So from my perspective, the very high level answer is yes to that question. If we just look at data around employment and salary, we can see that boot camps are typically worth it for the majority of graduates. We do this survey every year of thousands of boot campers, and I can share a little bit of that data if that would be helpful. So like a majority of boot campers, 83%, say that they've had a job since graduating that leveraged the technical skills that they learned at a boot camp. The average starting salary is about $67,000, and overall we see a 54% salary lift for all graduates, so about $24,000 in salary lift. So I mean, if you're just looking at ROI, you pay $12,000 to $15,000 for a boot camp, you work really hard, and you get a $24,000 salary increase. Like, you can do the math there, but that is, from that perspective, we'd say it's worth it. But if you're like a student watching this and thinking it's not all about salary for me, I think that is that's great. And I'm sure, as Joey can tell you, since he manages a team of engineers, tech jobs, I think we can think about, is it worth it based on like the quality of life that you have in those positions, or the opportunity to grow in a company or in your career, opportunity to be creative. And then the other layer to that question, TJ, is now that COVID-19 has hit, are boot camps still worth it? And that's a question that we're hearing a lot. And I think, what we're seeing is that during the pandemic specifically, the jobs that can be done remotely are a good place to be. And, while tech has been impacted just like every other industry right now, I think we've seen it be very necessary in order to kind of fuel the transition to online like commerce, learning, everything. And just anecdotally, you know, we're still seeing folks graduating from boot camps and during the pandemic and getting hired. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those later on in the panel. But yeah, that's kind of why I think boot camps are worth it, but it also depends on the student.
Yeah, obviously, you know, falling back to the data always helps. And, you know, you and the course report team put a ton of that out, and, you know, we really appreciate it. So, you know, she kind of set you up, Joey, you know, having managed engineers and, you know, hired, you know, engineers. And, you know, I know that's one of the roles that a VP really has to do a lot of, is recruit people. Do you see, you know, a difference, and do you see boot camps, you know, as a worthwhile investment for people who are looking to get into tech, and, as Liz mentioned, usually make a lifestyle change, because most people are either unhappy with what they're doing, or they just don't see themselves doing this long term. So what are your thoughts on if a boot camp is worth it?
Sure, I definitely think boot camps are still worth it. And I look at now, it might be a great time to invest because of COVID. So if we think about, you can't go out as much, you know, if you're stuck at home, why not take that extra free time to study and set yourself up for success in the future? So you can always look at it that way. You know, COVID will be gone one day, but your education and what you learn and setting yourself up for the future will be there. And, you know, now that you're not having those distractions of friends wanting to go out and meeting up with people and socializing, it's probably a great time to buckle down and learn something new. So I would say now is probably a great time to do it. You know, a lot of boot camps don't make you pay up front, and you don't have to start paying until you get a job. So again, why not take that opportunity now? It's not like you have to put any money up front, and it's not like you're risking anything. If, you know, COVID lasts too long, or if the market is, you know, the job market is bad. So I definitely think they're worth it. And you know, I see a lot of boot camp grads also, and they're pivoting. So, you know, I've seen people that have, you look at their resume and it's like they had like a very successful career as, you know, a senior accountant, or, you know, they're up there, and they wanted something different. So, you know, it would be a lot harder if you had to go to a 4-year degree to get into tech. So, you know, one of the things I love about boot camps are that they break down the barriers into technology. They allow people to follow a passion and be able to pivot that way, without having the investment of time and money into, you know, a 4-year degree. But I think the other big thing about, you know, as we talk about breaking down barriers, is people that can't afford a 4-year degree. And a boot camp is the only thing that they can take a chance on themselves for, or get into technology with. I love that it's getting more underprivileged people, more underrepresented people, an opportunity to have that dream. And it is, you know, technology is a lifestyle changing opportunity. If we look at just the salaries of engineers, you know, that changes your life. It could change the life of your family. It can change the life of your neighborhood. You're just being able to bring that type of, you know, salary, that type of money into, you know, some of these households that have been underprivileged for a long time. It's just, you know, that's the thing I love the most about boot camps, what they can accomplish and what they can do for people.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, that was a great point too about, you know, affecting your neighborhood and your community. They've done a ton of a ton of, I guess, kind of research on this, and high skill jobs like information technology roles actually contribute to 5 other service roles in their community, whether it's hairstylists, you know, people working at restaurants, obviously hospitality, that stuff's changed a little bit, but for that one job, you're also supporting 5 other people. Now, Alex, I know that we could ask and say, are boot camps worth it? And both of us want to say yes, because we want to stay in business. You know, we love what we're doing here. But I think, you know, one, I'd love to hear kind of your perspective, and, you know, we'll transition a little bit into the second question, which is also kind of how boot camps have adjusted. And you guys actually had the Vermont, I guess you have to finish, the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation reach out to you and ask how to do virtual learning. So not only, do we want to see, okay, are boot camps worth it, but like, are they still worth it if I'm taking classes from home?
Yeah, absolutely. To touch on if they're worth it, I think just the future career opportunity alone makes them worth it. So, I read a cool report from Microsoft that was saying that and by 2025, there's going to be 149 million new tech jobs, and 49 million of those are going to be in software engineering. And so this was greatly exacerbated by COVID-19, or the Great Lockdown, as they call it. So if you look at, like traditional models such as colleges or universities, the ROI on those just isn't what it was before. And I think it's something like approximately 53% of bachelor's degree holders actually either aren't employed or aren't employed with skills that actually require a bachelor's degree. And then I think you look, compared across the board with coding boot camps, it's something like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Liz, but, there's an 82% employment rate across the board. So I think just the return on the investment alone really, shows a really great opportunity for, people who want to take coding boot camps. So right now, I think they're important. And I think in the future, we're going to see a continued growing importance on coding boot camps. And then to answer your second question, about our, pivot, I think COVID has affected coding boot camps in a lot of ways. And I think the primary one for us, we made a big pivot to go completely online. And so, of course, there was a lot of anxieties with that. But we actually, once we started doing it, and I want to give a big shout out to my director of education, Josh Burke. He really, put the plan together to be able to do this quickly. And we were actually in a pretty unique situation where we were mid-course. So 6 weeks out of a 12-week course where these, students were going through a boot camp. And so on, week 6, we had to transfer everything on the line. So we actually got a really unique perspective from them about, seeing how supported they were during the course, and then how supported they were, during when they were in person versus how supported they felt when they were online. And actually there's a couple, interesting things. We were expecting the support maybe to feel, I think it just changes a little bit, the heart and soul. I think you lose a little bit of it when you go on the line, but actually to our surprise, we found out that a lot of students felt more supported. And the big reason being is that, we were able to record lessons for once. They're able to go back and actually, look at, what they may have missed in the course. But then the second thing is we actually, and this is where, to touch on the Vermont Student Assistance Corp reaching out to us, we had actually put our teaching assistants in separate channels using Discord. So they were sort of in this always open, always on channel. And so when a student had a question, sort of simulating when a student raises their hand in the middle of the class, they could actually just jump right in with a TA. And then doing that actually helped a lot of the shyer students, or the ones who just don't speak up as much or might feel insecure about interrupting the class. And so they actually felt more supported, like they were just able to jump right in with the TA and actually, get caught up to speed when they, maybe lose track of something going on in the class, and then they could look at the recording and go back to it. And we're able to adapt so quick that, VSAC ended up, reaching out to try to figure out how they could help replicate that. So, so there's, a lot of changes, but I think it's, you sort of lose that feel when you're all, not breathing the same air together. But I think at the same time, there's a lot of advantages to, doing this switch and being able to do courses online.
Yeah, Liz, you got something to add to that?
Yeah,
Definitely.
could you tell? I feel like I'm just nodding along, but I think that's really cool to hear like one school's story. And I think it just emphasizes that, the need for flexible, agile education is more important than ever. So it's been really cool to watch this from like a bird's eye view, this kind of incredibly quick and swift move online. I think only a couple of schools that I know of that have been hit like so hard that they actually closed due to COVID. But for the most part, what we're seeing is that almost every school in the US, if they weren't already online, has started teaching remotely. And we're seeing that, teaching happening remotely, but also hiring days, demo nights, moving online, more emphasis just being placed on preparing folks for the online interview, the remote, job search, and kind of like navigating everything online. And I think that's due partly, in part to the nature of boot camps, just because we don't have that kind of like red tape and bureaucracy in the boot camp industry, for better or worse. But because of that, in a time like this, it's easy to be flexible and agile. But also, I think it's just what boot camps has something to do with what boot camps are teaching, right? Like, we're not doing like biology labs or organic chemistry labs. Like, you're learning digital skills. So learning those skills remotely isn't a huge stretch. So we've actually seen, just at a high level, a lot of schools being really successful in this. And there are just, we've talked about this before, but there are tools that are available already that make these online classrooms really quite possible. So, Zoom, VS Code for pair programming, Slack, Discord, as Alex mentioned. Some schools have like proprietary learning platforms, and those are interesting. But the other thing that I'm seeing as schools kind of transition online is that it does mean that the boot camps and the students have to put some extra work in. So like Alex was mentioning, like starting that Discord channel, or like going the extra mile to make sure that people feel supported. It takes extra effort. And then one thing that I've heard from a couple of schools, Alex, I'm curious if y'all are seeing this, is just, and TJ too, is just that it just takes longer, like 15% longer to teach a class online than it did in person. So schools are kind of baking that into their days. Which I thought was interesting. I've heard of a couple of schools that are going to make their next cohort, 2 or 3 weeks longer, just because they're like, just literally takes longer to teach online than it does in person.
Yeah, we went to 14 weeks, and it was one of those decisions that, we had gotten some feedback from employers that just really said, make sure you're still focusing on the fundamentals. And then the other big thing that we wanted to make sure students were doing too is having everything ready to start that job search, because the tough part about working remotely is you're home alone. You can't come to a classroom and be around other people who are sitting there, and whether it's filling out applications or working on a project. So it does require a little bit of work. And I think this is where you see the difference between successful educational experiences and non-successful ones. And if we all think back to our college experience, we all had teachers who they came in every day excited. They may not have had 20 years of experience, but they were happy to be there. Their office hours were open. And that's what, you're hearing with some of these more traditional education, providers, is that I hate to say older teachers, but teachers who are more stuck in their ways are struggling to transition because it does require a little bit more work. But we're boot camps, we're nimble, and we're training people to be engineers, which are problem solvers. Hopefully we can figure this out ourselves if we're training other people to do that. Joey, I wanted to quickly jump over and kind of hear from your side. What has that transition been like? We obviously were able to, Alex, ourselves, and as Liz mentioned, all of the other boot camps, a lot of other boot camps out there transitioned pretty successfully to remote work. I'm assuming you guys did as well. Had you guys been doing much remote work before that, or was Clorox primarily on site, or had you guys been doing kind of a hybrid model?
So we were distributed before. So the direct to consumer unit that, where we work in has always been distributed. So I had engineers in San Francisco, New York, Florida, North Carolina already. So we had already, adopted to Zoom, Slack for most of it. I guess, the biggest difference is when we would onboard or make a new hire, we would fly them out to the Bethesda, Maryland location so that they could spend, a week with, the engineers in that office and with myself, just to give them a more nicer onboarding personal experience. And we were, our team was small enough then also that, we would really try to fly everybody out to Bethesda to get the entire team together just for a week. And, we would spend that week more doing team building and just hanging out than work. So just going to lunches, happy hours, dinners, and just getting that team together, just because, our team is built really on mentorship and growth. So we want them, to really have a tight knit group. So that's it has been the biggest challenge, is how do you continue to get a team to become close knit when they really are, 100% remote and you can't get together in person. So I think everyone on my team is like just, waiting for us to be able to have an offsite and all get together in person. I want to say 3 or 4 people that we've hired since COVID that we just haven't had to, we've never met in person. So it's a little weird. But, I think, you just have to be just that more intentional about trying to get people's input, make sure that they feel engaged, feel included. So it's just, it is the effort. You have to put a little bit more effort into making sure that when you have a big meeting, call out on some people that seem quieter, or, you haven't heard talk in a while, but just make sure that, you keep people engaged and happy, and, take that pulse every once in a while, how are things going? Like, I'm not talking about your projects or what you're working on, but just how are you doing? Are you making sure to log off on the weekends? Because, that always on mentality of us just being remote, it's a little hard. Our weekdays are bleeding into our weekends because we're just, it's not different. My
it's
home
tough
is
to
now
disconnect.
my office. Exactly. So being intentional about, take the time that you need, make sure that your mental health, that you're checking in on that, and that, turn off the computer, turn off Slack when the weekend comes around, do something to try to get out or prepare yourself for the next week. So just, I think, to your point, it just, there's that extra effort needed now to make sure things are still working well.
Joey, because of just like the nature of the product that Clorox sells, are y'all like finding yourselves hiring a lot more right now? I'm just kind of curious.
So I would say probably on the more Clorox retail side of things, there's probably a lot more movement there. We have been hiring, I would say, a lot. So my team went from 3 people a year ago to we're at 13 now. And that, we've introduced new functions. So, we never worked with, I never had a product team before. And so when our new president came in, he introduced, and we built out an entire product team. So some of those teams that were introduced and were like bare bones, we're still hiring and filling those out as we're taking on more and more projects for Clorox. Definitely, we're still, we still have hiring going on. We're still growing. Our stock skyrocketed, so that's always nice. Unfortunate set of circumstances, but fortunate that we, we're able to, kind of benefit from that. But I think anyone would tell you at Clorox, they would rather us had stayed the same, not had this happen to people, than see our stock go up. So
yeah. So Joey, you had mentioned, and Alex, I'll direct this one towards you. Joey, you had mentioned there's no question about it. There's hiring and tech going on, and I think a lot of people, when they hear coding boot camps, they think software engineering, web development. But one of the roles that you mentioned is product managers, which typically, I think there's 1 or 2 schools that actually teach product management, but a lot of schools, and Alex, y'all are one of them. We did this as well. We've introduced UX classes now, and this is another route for people to get into tech. Alex, can you tell us kind of about what led to that launch of your UX program, and then maybe any other initiatives that you guys have launched recently as well?
Yeah. So with the UX program, I think, it's just, it's really cool, cutting edge. And I think it's pretty nuanced, and I think it was an interesting thing to explore. And I think that we're starting to see a lot more hiring for it. I don't think the emphasis was put on UX roles so much, maybe 5-10 years ago, but now we're starting to see a lot more emphasis for it. So part of it was just following market trends. And, my co-founder, Benny, he's the CEO of the company. He also is a UX designer, and that's what he was in his previous role too. So a lot of it was a bit of a passion project for us as well. But I think it was a nice differentiator, and I think, you know, having our team be so personally involved with it, we were, you know, able to produce a really good course. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
And then from the hirings, I was going to ask if you guys had any other initiatives that you've kind of recently launched as well.
Oh yeah, yep. So I mean, in addition to going online, I mean, another thing that we're doing right now is building out our own LMS. So you know, it's really a nice way to be able to keep everything in-house, as Liz had mentioned before. Some boot camps having their own system, and so I think you know, being able to offer sort of asynchronous options as well as synchronous options to really advance student learning as well. So that's something that we're building out that we're really excited to be able to include in the education that students get in addition to their boot camp education as well.
Nice. And I know, you know, hiring obviously, you know, kind of took a little bit of a hit. Everybody, you know, COVID came. We, you know, all got slapped across the face, and we're kind of in this position where it's like, what is going on? And companies kind of had to readjust, not just to life, you know, working from home, but also what's, you know, going to be 2 months, 3 months down the line, yet what is, you know, even tomorrow going to hold from us. Liz, what have you seen from, you know, kind of the hiring side? Because, you know, once again, the primary, and you know this just as well as anybody, the number one reason people go to a boot camp is typically for the outcomes. You know, has it stayed fairly consistent? And, you know, do you have any tips for people who are going through a potentially remote job search?
Yeah, okay, so there are two resources that we've been keeping up with, and I think have been interesting. I don't know if y'all have seen these, but there's one called layoffs.fyi, and then another Candor, which is like 100% real-time user-generated lists of companies that are hiring, freezing, furloughing, laying off, et cetera, throughout the pandemic. So we've been keeping up with that. And then in the last few months, you know, I've talked to alumni who graduated from boot camps during the pandemic, got jobs. I'm just like looking at our blog right now. But like, you know, Alex was hired as a remote web engineer at Coat Rack Web Services. Josie was hired on Citibank, their like rewards microservices team. Someone else I just talked to was just hired at Equient. So like, I'm sure, TJ, you can probably speak to the companies where LearningFuze, you know, grads are getting hired, and Alex, you as well. I also just recently talked to Progressive Insurance. They just moved all of their onboarding remote, but they're still hiring. ServiceNow, which is actually based in California, I think that they're a cloud services company, so they're obviously hiring even more. So yeah, I mean, it's happening. Students are still getting hired after a boot camp. What I hear most is that it's taking longer, and you know, at this point we don't have that like really good data around who's getting hired and how long it's taking, but we'll do that that alumni outcomes report in a few months, so we'll get to see that. But yeah, you know, from my perspective, I'm talking to alumni all the time that are going through the process and getting hired. And then if you're a future student who's watching this, I think it's important that the boot camps that you're researching and that you're talking to can answer that question, right? Like that is an important question right now, and they know their employer networks best. So that's something you should definitely be asking in the interview process.
Yeah, and I think on top of that too, you know, making sure that you ask boot camps to speak with their alumni too and current students. I think that's also really helpful, just to, you know, if you're an incoming student, to be able to get their experience. You know, in terms of I think even types of companies to be applying to, you know, we saw hiring freezes a lot of the time with these larger companies. So, you know, that's, and I think that sort of, they, you know, hit the panic button and they just have a lot more assets to look out for. But on the flip side of that, you know, we see that hiring either continued or increased with like small to mid-sized companies. And I think a lot of that was because of the PPP loan. And so a lot of those companies just had to maintain their employment levels to be able to have the government ultimately forgive those loans. So I think because of that, they actually, increased or continued hiring. So that might be part of the strategy as well for students on just which companies to be targeting. If you're getting a lot of those rejections from the larger companies, maybe look at some of those smaller mid-sized companies as well, because as far as I've seen around in Vermont, those are the ones that have, been making a lot of moves with continuing to hire.
Yeah. And, they're able to stay nimble. That's exactly what is needed, in this current, I loved the great lockdown. I love it. So, it's a great spot too. And that's where we hear pretty often, that boot camp graduates have a great fit is on these smaller companies. They move quick. You have to wear different hats. You're learning quickly. And most boot camp graduates, and this is something we talk to our students about all the time, is take the knowledge you have from your degree or your previous work experience, and it's going to make that job search or whatever you're going to do for a company so much better. And talk about that, bring that to the forefront. And so one of the big pushes we've had with our students going through, the interviewing process in this, virtual job search is you have to be on LinkedIn. And if you're not on LinkedIn, and coming from a hiring background and recruiting background myself, I know a ton of people who wouldn't hire somebody if they don't have a LinkedIn profile. Joey, that's where we met, was through LinkedIn. You've been doing a ton of activity there. I listened to one of your interviews recently with Rod, where you actually said before coming into this role, I think you had like a couple, maybe 100 or 200 connections on LinkedIn. You're now up in the 10,000 range. What advice do you have for people who are going through the job search and how to best utilize and put themselves in a position to get the attention of a large company, possibly like Clorox?
So definitely, LinkedIn, I would say, not only just because, we hiring managers now look up people on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn to network. And I think, I just posted recently about someone that had messaged me and said, I had a connection, they were a connection. I just happened, I liked, her post about her displaying her portfolio, and a VP of tech that was my connection just happened to see that I liked it, saw it, and she got a job at Petco. So as a junior front end engineer. So you just never know what's gonna, happen with the connections that you make there. So, and I think, a lot and more, I'm seeing people very willing to try to amplify people's voices, shine light on people and try to introduce people to other people, or at least they're sharing out the jobs that they're coming across. So just as a place where you'll constantly see hiring managers posting jobs, you'll see, every time I have a job opening, I'm always posting it. I'm posting all of the job openings that my colleagues have just to get it out there. So just for the networking benefit alone, I would definitely tell you to be on LinkedIn. And then as your career progresses, if you get into management or you have to build teams, a lot of companies will look at you and say, can this person recruit talent? So if you start your network now, by the time you get to that place, you'll have probably a great network and a great pipeline of engineers that maybe they were bootcamp grads when you started, but in the next 5 years, 10 years, they became seniors. So these are people that you already have a great connection with. You're not just cold reaching out to people and trying to build a network when you need it, but you already have that pipeline. So I would say that's, one of the big things is just network. I think a lot of people will try to help you, or at least support you and motivate you or inspire you to keep going. I've also gotten messages where people have said, something that you said to me a couple months ago just inspired me to keep going and helped me get through the search. Now that I got a job, I'm glad I stuck with it. But then I would say, to your point, use your background. Don't shy away from it and just focus on the engineer. When I hire for junior roles, and one of the reasons I like bootcamp grads is because they have real world experience in something else. So we build e-com platform. We're in charge of building the e-com platform for Clorox, but we also do direct to consumers. There's a lot of marketing component, product component. So I've seen bootcamp grads that have been digital marketers before. I want to hire that person because I can tap into their marketing expertise. They're already going to be a great partner to our marketing teams because they have a background in it. So try to look for the jobs that you can leverage your past experience with, so that, you can show them, I can make an immediate impact for your business right now because I have this business knowledge or this other knowledge that you guys need, while I ramp up on my technical knowledge and continue to grow with, on the technical side of things. But I look at where can that person make an impact right now, and from a culture standpoint, how much effort will they put into getting better down the road? And so those are the two things I look for when I'm hiring junior level or entry level positions. Culture, how much curiosity, passion, grit they have. And another thing I love about bootcamp grads, they usually have a ton of grit, because if you think about someone who's willing to give up a great career to do something and chase their passion and cram that much knowledge into like a 4-month period, that's probably a person that's not going to quit on you when you have a hard project or a tight deadline. So from a culture standpoint, I look for curiosity, passion, grit, and then from where can I find immediate impact from a candidate? So and it doesn't have to be purely on the technical side. So again, can I marry their accounting background? Can I marry their marketing background? Can I marry these backgrounds in other areas to things that I need in my company? Because I've hired engineers that didn't know anything about e-com, and I spend a lot of time having to teach them about e-com. So whether I have to spend
them that there's a customer on the other side that they're
right. So if I have to, whether I have to take the time to train them on the technical side or the business side, that's still time to ramp up. So if I can find someone that already is on the business side, I ramp them up on the technical. If I find someone on the technical, you ramp them up on the business. But don't shy away from, your background. Use it, and at least use it to get your foot in the door, and then I would say learn as much as possible and be fearless once you get that first job. All the bootcamp grads that I have on my team, one thing that they all have in common is that you can throw any challenge at them, and they want it, and they want to learn, and they work so much harder trying to grow than I would say I've seen from 4-year college grads. And I think it goes to the mindset of someone going through a boot camp versus the mindset of going through a 4-year degree. Kind of 4-year degree is kind of the norm, and it's just that's the path. People that want to go into boot camps, those are the ones that are really have a passion, are really pushing for a better life. So they already have that drive and they already have that desire. So
yeah. And unless Petco's hiring a ton of people, it might have been one of the students from LearningFuze, because I'm trying to help her talk about that offer right now. Which once again, the fact that it was the networking, the fact that all she had to do was post her portfolio. You commented on it. It I think a lot of people don't realize what that effect and how big the reach can be. Alex, we touched upon this earlier. You are a 2-time pitch contest winner. So when it comes to presenting yourself, when it comes to interviewing, Joey just laid out how to get to that interview. Do you have any tips for a Zoom interview or for a student to properly talk about their skill set to an employer?
Yeah, I think, the advantage of being on Zoom is you can have some notes around you if that's, helpful. But yeah, I think just preparation is key, really. And, understanding sort of, what things to accentuate. I know when I am looking to hire somebody, and we're looking through applications, it's not always, some of those, like, did this person go to an Ivy League or something like that? A lot of the time, I look at, are they a good culture fit? When I'm talking to somebody, I think you can sort of sum them up. And I think, a way that I would sum up a lot of the people that work at Burlington Code Academy is they're all very sweet people. And so I think it's, that's sort of ingrained in our culture. And so I think even, understanding what the company is and trying to know a little bit about the culture first, and then seeing if that's a good fit for you. And I think that's a realization, and that's something that our career coaches really try to nail down with students is, do you even want to work for this company? And does this company's culture match yourself? And so I think when you go into it understanding that there's going to be a good match between your own personal style and the culture of this company, I think that just gives the person a lot more confidence. No one likes a stiff interview. I really love when interviews turn very conversational. And so I think just going into, making sure that you're, applying to the right places beforehand really sets you up well, to really nail the interview too. And then, you get into the technical stuff as well. But, sometimes I see developers that aren't as strong as other developers get the job because they really nailed that culture aspect of it. So, yeah, I think, understanding that bootcamp graduates, especially when you're suffering from imposter syndrome and you're like, oh man, am I really, am I really cut out to do this kind of work? I think it just goes a long way, just understanding that, beyond the work that, this company is actually a company that fits who you are, rather than just, being grateful that they're going to hire you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we actually had a lunch and learn with an employer yesterday. And as the guy was going through an exercise, he said, hey, everybody raise your hand if you, are experiencing imposter syndrome. And I just naturally, it just went up, even though he's talking to the students. And, Joey, you even, had mentioned this, recently and stuff.
I was talking to a coworker. I was talking to a coworker about that, and I related it back to when you grow up, where when you go to elementary school, you first grade, you're the youngest person there. It's all new to you. It's scary, and then by the time you hit fourth grade, you're on top of the world. And then you go to middle school, and it's all over again. You're fifth grade, you're the youngest person. It's all new to you. By the time you hit eighth grade, I think same thing in tech. I think the first step, you're very, you have that issue when you're trying to get your first job. And then when you get your first job, it's your, the first time that you've been a software engineer, and it's scary. And then, you become a senior software engineer, but then that has its own new responsibilities, own new things that you have to know and pick up. So that cycle repeats. For me, it's the first time that I've been a VP at a company. So, there's still a ton of things I need to learn. There's still a ton of things about leadership I need to learn. So you're always going to be at that place where you're do I belong here? Do I know enough? You're always going to have that doubt, and no matter where you are in your career. And for me, I would just tell you to embrace it. Use it to motivate you. Use it to push you to continue to grow. But everyone does it. Everyone has those doubts. And you just have to know that it's normal and it's natural. And, as long as you continue to grow, and I just try to tell people try to learn one thing or get better at one thing every day, and just take it day by day, and focus on that, and you'll probably turn out pretty good. But also, if you start to feel that way, make sure that you have someone that you can talk to about it. Someone on the team. Hopefully you have a good enough relationship with your manager. If they are a good manager, that you can have those conversations with them, and I'm feeling this way, is it right? Are there things I need to work on? But then, I just want to go back to the interview process, and echo what Alexander said, because I think it's really important, that you are also interviewing the company. Don't think it's a one-way street there. Make sure that company is going to be a great place for you to grow. And that they're going to respect you, and don't feel like just because you're a bootcamp grad, you have to take the first job thrown at you, or that you should just be lucky someone wanted to hire you. Definitely do not make that mistake, because I can promise you, if you make a bad decision with your first job, it can set your career back a very, very long way. Between not having the right mentorship and then the right learning opportunities to salary, companies do not give you 30% raises just because you did a better job. There are guidelines. So if you take a small salary in the beginning, it's going to take you a lot of years of that company really committing to get you back to where you should have been. And I've seen it happen. And it really sucks, because as much as I want to just make one lump adjustment and get that person back to where they need to be, I can't. So I have to just, continue to tell them, I'm sorry that we lowballed you. Honestly, when you got here, I'm doing everything I can year over year to get you back to where you want to be. But it's very important to just, as hard as it may be, just remember what you're worth, and don't let that nervousness of should I, can I get a job to affect you, but just hold on to that and get a job that really values you. And we'll put you in a great place to succeed.
Yeah, sweet. So we're kind of hitting the final lap here. And, you know, I think one of my favorite statistics to talk to students about is 70% of managers expect you to negotiate. Go in there knowing that. Just don't write a piece of paper, slide it across the table, and expect it to be that number. So we've talked about kind of what happened when COVID hit, how boot camps have adjusted. You know, I think we can all agree, once again, we think that it's a very worthwhile, you know, thing for people to look into and an investment to make in yourself. Liz, once again, as somebody who sees this bird's eye view, is talking to boot camp graduates all day, companies all day, what do you see moving forward? And by no means are we going to quote you on this, because COVID could change anything, but what do you think is going to happen, you know, over the course of the next year and even into the 2021 with the boot camp space?
Well, I think that, you know, naturally and obviously no one has a crystal ball here. Yeah. We're doing our market sizing report right now and basically asking schools like how many people are graduating from in-person programs at your school and online, and comparing that from 2019 to 2020. We're not totally done with the analysis on it yet, but we're already seeing like what you would expect, that boot camps have basically shifted all learning into online. And, you know, as boot camps like have gone remote, the other thing that I'm noticing, just kind of like a nuanced change, is that they're able to accept folks outside of their, like their cities. Yeah, whether that's, you know, Burlington, or whether that's outside of San Francisco. And so I think that has been really interesting and could actually accelerate some interesting like demographic shifts in the next year, which would be great. You know, naturally, I think this is all just accelerating the move towards remote work. So one thing that I actually hear every once in a while is like, there are always going to be students who are saying, I just can't learn online. Like, I'm going to wait till all of this blows over and just learn in person. And that's totally fine. Like, I understand that point of view entirely. But the fact is that COVID is not just accelerating the shift to online learning, like it's also accelerating that shift to online work. So this time, I think, is specifically a really good opportunity to learn how to work and learn remotely, like learning those remote communication skills, those remote like collaboration skills, everything that you basically need in order to be a successful remote employee is something that you can learn by, you know, going to a remote boot camp. So yeah, I see, you know, I think there are a lot of predictions to make, but I think a lot of the schools that are moving online will at least keep an online presence, even once COVID has died down. And I think that even when you know, companies go back to in-person work, there's still going to be a very much accelerated presence and, you know, remote work. So I don't think we're done learning online just when COVID, you know, hopefully blows over.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point. And just, you know, from our perspective, you know, up here in Burlington, we're actually seeing a lot of young professionals coming from the city, moving to places, you know, more rural,
we're
like,
not
you
gonna
know,
switch right back. Yeah, we're not gonna.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, so that's really nice too. And then, you know, on just something to mention also, you know, in addition to COVID, you know, I think there's, you know, you can't ignore the social movements that are going on right now too. And I think it's pretty cool and pretty interesting that a lot of boot camps are, you know, coming out with various initiatives to help more diverse folks get into these, you know, courses. You know, there's a lot of initiative for, you know, the LGBTQ community, the BIPOC community, getting women into coding boot camps. And I think it's really great. And we're seeing a lot more coding boot camps really taking the initiative to sort of even the score there. You know, and you mentioned before, you know, something else that we're, you know, have to announce is, you know, we just, you know, for Burlington Code Academy, we just announced an impact scholarship. And so that is for, you know, the LGBTQ community, women, and BIPOC communities, to be able to get people into these coding boot camps, you know, with some sort of tuition assistance, you know, and really be able to make a difference that way. So I think, you know, the remote culture as well, but also there's a lot of social impacts that, I think the onus is on coding boot camps to be able to help sort of level the playing field for, equalizing the tech industry as a whole.
For sure. And like, if we do shift away from those major tech hubs, I think that's also key to diversifying tech too. Because if the highest salaries are just going to folks who can already afford to live in San Francisco, like, love you, but we're just perpetuating that lack of diversity in tech. So yeah, all of the above.
Yeah. So I was gonna say it's exciting. There's obviously so many things, to look forward to, whether it's, remote work, whether it's the opportunity, to learn from home and stay at home and, create a new lifestyle for yourself. Before we wrap up, is there any final thoughts you guys want to, or even advice you'd like to give people as they're either looking into a boot camp or possibly going through them right now? And
yeah, real quick, I think now,
Sorry, I might be lagging here. Alex or Liz or Joey, anything you guys want to toss in there?
Yeah, I think, now there's a lot of hesitancy of going to college. So, I always encourage gap year students. I just think people going into college right now, it might be a weird year for colleges, and they might not be able to fully deliver the, the value of what colleges traditionally were able to do. So I think now is a good year for gap year students, or, folks who maybe were coming in, and just considering their options for an education. I'd say now is a good time to join a coding boot camp.
That's really good advice, a really good point. I think my advice is that, anyone can do a coding boot camp. I know this, like, I've been talking to alumni from boot camps for 7 years who have every type of background you can imagine across race, gender, socioeconomic status, folks with entirely different motivations for doing boot camps. But you should start with free resources. Make sure that this is something that you want to do as a career every day. And then once you're actually thinking about a boot camp, do your research. Even though we're now doing everything online, read reviews, ask tons of questions. Even though everything's online, every boot camp I know, I think, is still hosting info sessions. We've been doing these virtual classroom tours, so you could look at those. And also, as Alex mentioned before, there are tons of scholarships right now that are specifically for folks who are impacted by COVID, workforce development grants. So, take advantage of those. And, you can use course report. Reach out to me if you have any specific questions. I'm always happy to guide people through it.
Awesome. And I guess I would just say, make sure that you have a passion for it, because, technology is one of those industries that's always changing. So when you say that you want to get into tech, when you want to be an engineer or whatever it may be, you really are signing up for a lifelong journey of learning. If you stop learning, you will get left behind pretty quickly. So make sure you have a passion for it, because if you really don't like it, it could become a very big drag on you, having to try to constantly keep up with the new trends and everything. So that would be my big thing. I want everyone that has a passion for tech to be able to get into it. And that's why I love Bootcamp, because it really does break those barriers down. But make sure the passion is there first, and it's not just, I just want that paycheck, or I just want, that. You should like what you do every day, especially in something that's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and will constantly require you to keep up.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much again for taking the time today. Apologies for kind of this little lag thing that happened at the end. There might be a bat in here. I'm not sure. It's a little old of a cabin, but what we'll do is we'll share, ways that people could get in touch with you, whether it's through LinkedIn or through email, because I mean, we could probably talk about this stuff for another hour, 2 hours, and dive into it. But I know a lot of people are kind of wondering what they can do next, and we've got such great resources out there. So once again, thank you so much for taking the time, and definitely excited to see what the second half of 2020 has in store for us, and hit the reset button in 2021 and come out even more firing than we were before. So hope you all have a great rest of the day. Obviously, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy out there too, because mental health is very important.